if you were friends with Cricket at that time and you witness this, or he comes to you and he's like, man, I really like this girl, Olympia. Like, what should I do? Because he's conflicted. He doesn't really know how to deal with the situation. Basically.
I've had so many people say that they feel so protective of Cricket and think that, they'll use pop psychology terms about what she's doing to him. And I don't subscribe to any of these terms. I think they're all, I think people are way more complex than whatever the lingo of the day will ascribe to them. So I think that they're always madly in love, just in a very hard way to define.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Love, Loss, and Hallucinations. I am your host, Scott Schumaker, and this week's guest is Dave Eggers. Dave is absolutely one of the most interesting humans I know, and in my opinion, one of America's best living writers. And I'm not just saying that because I've had the very good fortune of knowing him for almost 20 years now. Our conversation, well, hang on because it is a ride. We talk about shipwrecks, the U.S. justice system, carpet mushrooms, the wonders and woes of terry cloth, the craft of writing, love, among other things, and his new book, Contrapposto, which I swear on the life of my dogs is one of the best books I've ever read. If you don't already know Dave is a Pulitzer Prize-nominated author who has written over 16 books, including his breakout memoir from 2000, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius. Other books include The Mucka Mocha, The Circle, A Hologram for the King, What is the What, as well as children's books. He doesn't not write. So he has children's books like...
Doesn't not write.
Doesn't not write. Good sentence, right?
Really
Thank
elegant.
you. Yeah. You can call me.
See you in your element here.
How well I speak English like.
Such a wordsmith with a doesn't not write. That's a great blurb.
So children's books.
Not right. Scott Schumaker. Are you going to keep doing this intro? All right.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll come back to my grammar later in the podcast.
I think it should be all about your grammar.
Yeah, all about my grammar.
I got a lot of things to talk
children's books like The Eyes and the Impossible. He's also the founder of the indie publisher McSweeney's, and nonprofits like 826 Valencia and 826 National, which altogether is a network of youth writing and tutoring centers around the U.S. First, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for taking the time today. I know you're busy promoting the book and life and all the many things you have going on.
It's just funny to, I'm in your house sometimes not doing this, and here we are. Suddenly you're putting on the podcast hat.
Yeah.
It's very, you get very official.
Yes,
I like that.
Yeah, it's getting official.
And are you wearing terry cloth? What are you wearing?
It is terry cloth. Okay. It's a little disco
just want to make
blue.
Sure. Do they currently make these, or is this a vintage
This is a
thing?
recent purchase.
Because I thought that they burned all those factories down. All
terry
the terry cloth factories
baby.
down.
Yeah.
Like asbestos.
That is probably
we
true.
just have to hunt down all terry cloth class action lawsuits, those that wore terry cloth.
I'll be sure to
I'm not going to let you stay on any subject.
No, I can tell. We're going all over the place today.
It's going to be terry cloth, and then the pattern on these couches.
Yes, which
I've got a bunch of other
unintentionally kind of goes with the whole podcast theme of love, loss, and hallucinations. I
don't think so at all.
There's some mushrooms going on.
Oh,
some
the
dragons.
mushrooms. Okay.
Yeah.
Have dragons figured in a lot with your podcast?
Not at all. First time today.
I don't know if those are dragons. I think that what we have there is a hippogriff.
A hippogriff
is half lion, half eagle. Is a hippogriff.
Oh, I see that now.
Yeah. So wordsmith to wordsmith. I'm just giving you a good
Noted.
one.
I'm gonna have to, because there's 3 or 4 different mythical animals.
Yeah, you just said aminals.
And I know you're going to call me on everything today, I can tell.
No, this is, I'm going to steal one of these couches. I don't need both. I just need one.
Okay.
So at some point, if one goes missing,
I'll be coming to your boat and finding it there.
I just had to empty the boat of all fabric because I had black molds. The entire thing was black mold because moisture gets in and then it gets trapped in the winter, especially. It's really wet. All the storms and everything. And then I'm not there for, week on end. And all of this, like somebody had outfitted this boat with like a lot of like very 70s brown and orange fabric, but it's supposed to be very durable and cleanable, but it retains all that moisture.
Yeah, sort of like the shirt that I'm wearing.
It's a lot like that, which you shouldn't be wearing. I think it's probably very toxic, and it's leaching into your skin right now in ways you don't know for decades. And we're going to be like, why? What happened to Scott? His brain went so young for such an active guy.
Was it a while before you realized this black mold?
I lived with the black mold for a while because I'll live with anything like that. I sprayed bleach on it, as one does.
Yeah.
And then it was still there. And, and then I thought, like, why do I need any of this fabric? It's this tiny sailboat that I write on.
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact size inside as this couch, but it was like all, this fabric. So I just took it all out, which is so much better. And now I just have cushions and things in there that don't, retain any moisture. But I think the black mold thing is super overstated. I just want to tell you all.
You've lived with
for
it.
About a
He's
year,
fine.
Totally fine.
As he starts coughing and loses an arm.
Just extra phlegm, a little blood in the phlegm every so often. But who doesn't cough up blood once a week?
Once in a while, yeah.
Does it have to be a big deal that we like, stigmatize black mold?
But wait, so I mean, this couch is like maybe 4 feet by 2.5 feet wide.
Yeah,
this is your writing space.
Yeah, I mean, the space that you can really sit in. You can't stand up in this boat. It's basically you could sleep two inside on both. It's like two little cushions out. There were cushions, no longer cushions, but you couldn't sleep more than two people in it. So it's a little sailboat.
And so that's your writing space. Like, why a boat?
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to get out of my garage where I was writing for years, and
no black mold.
There was mold there too. No,
it's following you.
What's really funny is that wasn't black mold, but I did have a carpet in this garage. And again, there was just like two windows up, those high windows that you have in a garage. So no view of anything. But again, moisture comes in and then is trapped. So I had mushrooms growing through the carpet, which was fascinating to see. I didn't know that was possible.
Were you like,
I learned so
what
much.
Is that coming up out of my carpet?
I harvested them for you and you
I ate them.
Yeah,
and that's the beginning of my whole journey.
That was chapter 12 of your book, was the carpet mushrooms. So I was like, there's a funny thing. And I think that since your podcast is very philosophical and about how we live and should live, I will say that I think that I was working indoors in a garage with mushrooms growing out of the carpet between my feet. And I thought, this is like a really weird way to live. Like, it's not really what I had foreseen for myself.
Yeah.
It's not super romantic. And so I really did. And this was during COVID too. I just thought, like, okay, we were all working at home, my wife and I, and Vendela, she's a writer and she's got her office at home, and we were all home and the kids were at home in high school. And there's just too many people. And so I thought, and we do have a lot of friends that know about boats and fish a lot. And I started asking around, where do you get a boat? I wondered, where do you get a cheap boat? So we bought this boat from a guy there's a guy in Sausalito. His name is Dave. Dave's
the boat guy.
He's Dave's diving.
Okay.
So what he does truly is that, you scrape the bottoms of the boats, because here they're kept in marinas all year round, and then algae and barnacles and seaweed grows onto them. So there are professionals that will scrape the bottoms of the boats to get rid of all that. And so this guy Dave, who knew some of my friends, and he had a boat for sale for like much less than what you pay for this couch. It's like the cost of a couch.
You got to have mushrooms on the side of the boat for it to get to this level.
Well, for sure. And But everybody's always trying to sell a boat. So if you ever want to buy a boat, you usually
find it no
barter
problem
for the boat, you know?
So does it just stay in its slip, or
Yeah,
do
it's
you
in a
actually
slip.
sail it out, or
I've
is
sailed
it
it a
really
little
just a
bit.
bobbing office?
I need help. I can't sail it alone. But if somebody who's a very good sailor is with me, then we're golden. I mean, it has an outboard motor, so I can go under just, you know, motor power and cook around the bay. But, you know, it's the bay where we are is not for amateurs. Like most of it,
I mean, just
the
last
second you're
week,
out there,
those people got swamped and
that
a couple
was,
people died. That
I
was
could
crazy.
see that from where my boat is. And like,
wow,
it was terrible. Yeah. And there's, you know, those folks were mourning a lost one, a loved one. And then it's very hairy out there and you have to really know what you're doing. And even if you do, there's so much that can happen out there. And I've read books and books about all the Bay Area shipwrecks. Like this was like a hobby of mine.
Oh, really?
A couple of years ago. I mean, I could name hundreds of them for you and how they happened and why. I mean, they started happening a lot less in this century.
Yeah.
But in the late 19th and all the way through the 30s of the last century, it was constant. I mean, every week. Yeah. And
well, especially once you get outside the bridge, Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, those waters get crazy.
Well, it's mostly right around the bay because there's shoals. There's like rocks, especially on the Marin side. It's very rocky and they don't show up and people would run aground. And then you go toward Point Reyes, and Point Reyes is tricky. It's like sandbars out there and people would run aground there. So I told you we were going to go talk about weird stuff.
Yeah, who knows?
But, you know, and around here, you know, Tennessee Valley is called Tennessee Valley because that's a ship, the Tennessee, that sunk right there. I did not
know that.
And it sunk over like a few days such that people watched it.
Wow.
And you could get the people off via pulley, you know, and all this stuff. And it was almost a spectator sport from time to time when they would see a ship run aground, and then the thing would be about saving the people, which they usually did.
Yeah.
And then slowly getting all the equipment off. And there were people called wreckers that would go out.
And that was just a safe job going out.
It was a profit-driven job.
Oh, sure.
The wreckers would come to the sinking boat and negotiate with the captain as it's sinking. Saying, I'll get it, I'll buy it all off of you, almost like Pawn Stars, right? I'll buy everything inside your boat for $2,000. And then they would negotiate, and the captain would say, okay, that's a loss of, you know, whatever, okay, good price. And then it would be up to the wreckers to try to profit from them, try to salvage everything they could from the sinking boat. Isn't that interesting?
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, do you just like, does something grab your fancy and you just kind of go in?
Yeah, that was recommended by a bookseller who was sitting in front of counter at Books by the Bay, and guy Jeff, he said, yeah, you know, it was a local author that wrote that book. But I read really oddly. Like I love weird nonfiction. I picked up a book today.
Well, yeah, okay.
It would be hard for me to pick up the boat. Yeah.
My talking is contagious.
What did you say? He doesn't not write. I just love this. So yeah, I wrote, I picked up a book today, by Anatole France called Penguin Island, which is sort of like a, satire of religion at the time, really. And I'm only like 10 pages in it. I was reading it while waiting on jury duty this morning at the Hall of Justice, waiting for me to be
this whole podcast almost didn't happen, although you were pretty sure you were going to get shut down.
Yeah, I get called once a year for jury duty, and then usually I'm dismissed once they find out that I've written, you know, edited books about the frailties of the judicial system. They think that could be a biased
Would
juror.
you want to be on jury duty?
I would desperately want to be on jury duty. So does
Tiffany. Tiffany's all about wanting to, she's like, pick me, raising her hand.
Every so often there's been a judge that's like actually kept me has encouraged me to go through the process. And then one of the lawyers during selection of voir dire will say, I don't want you. They can challenge anybody for no reason. So I'm usually gone very quickly because they just want somebody that doesn't have that much information in their head about the many, many ways that people are wrongfully convicted. Wouldn't it be better if somebody was just a little bit more of a blank slate? And so, but here in the Bay Area, like the San Francisco courts are uniquely liberal across I think that even the prosecutors that I've watched, and I watch a lot of trials, is another weird thing I do, but I just sit
your free time, you go
I'll sit in the audience and watch trials. And I have found so many prosecutors that, not all of them, but in many cases, they're not there just to over-incarcerate people. Yeah. Sometimes I watched a guy defend himself, and it was a pretty intense crime. But he was defending himself, which is never a good idea. But both sides, the prosecutor and the public defender's office, were trying to help him. And during breaks, they were like meeting with him and, trying to give him the best chance. Giving him some
guidance on how to defend himself.
I think it was a 3 strikes thing too. Oh, so they're always trying, at least the good people that work at the Hall of Justice are trying to make sure that people don't get sent away on a 3 strikes thing. So, so it's an interesting court because of courthouse, because overall, even the prosecutors are far left of the prosecutors that you'd find like in Alabama or something, when there are so many people that are actually counting heads, like trying to they advance by putting people away for as long as they can, which is one of the great problems with our judicial system is over sentencing. Not that some people shouldn't be punished for certain crimes, but the over sentencing is the uniquely American problem.
Yes, agree.
So back to terry cloth.
Back to terry cloth.
As it's absorbent. So if you were to sweat in it, it's kind of like a towel.
Yeah, I'm like sweating like just a sponge right now. And
but
you
don't see it.
It's a beautiful thing. It comes from the swimming days.
And then you just sort of wring it out like a towel.
Yeah, it comes from my swimming days. It just gives me comfort to be wearing it.
I would think it's comfortable. It doesn't chafe at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
I haven't worn it as like underwear, so I don't really know there. But
if terry cloth gets a little rough, if something happens,
too many washings,
it gets rough, then the chafing happens.
Chafed out.
See how sort of seamless that segue was between the American justice system
and terry cloth and chafing.
Chafing.
Well, just one more question about your boat.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm sure you've answered this a million times and I'm still going to ask it, but like, what is like, when you get there, I know you have a lot of things going on. So is there like a set schedule? You're like, I'm going there to write and this is what's going to happen. Or do you have to like force it and like calendar it and make it happen and show up? I mean, because that's so much, people are always like, what is the key to writing and writing well? And a lot of it's just showing up.
Always.
Yeah.
No, I would tell anybody that. To me, this was going to be a writing day. And then I realized last night at like 8 that I was summoned to the jury. So it became not a writing day. Because if I don't have all day, then I don't even bother. So,
like a full 8 hours, you need to like get there, get in the zone, start to crank it out.
Yeah. I mean, if I have a dentist appointment at 2 p.m., I don't write that day because I just can't, I won't even be able to get, and I just need to see just an endless horizon of time to be like total blank slate for the day. And so I would go down there and these days I read first in the morning, which is like something I started doing the last 10, 15 years where I used to read at night and fall asleep. And, that's fine. But now that I read in the morning with coffee, I read so much more. And so, read for an hour and a half in the morning to get myself in a really nice, calm space. And you go to the boat. Set. I have a little boombox that's like $69 boombox from Target, and plays CDs.
Playing CDs.
All my CDs from honestly since I was 12. I have every one of them. And but the CD part just died like a month ago. So now all I can do is play the radio, and I have it set to KDFC, the local classical radio station, because nothing else is everything else is too many commercials in it.
Yeah.
But I used to put on a CD for the last couple of years. It was a Sinead O'Connor CD of like Irish standards and like beautiful, almost a cappella, almost all of it. And later in her career, or I'd put on something similar like that, like Beth Orton, or something vocal but very mellow and meditative, I guess. And then I would still stall for the first 2.5 hours. Like I'd do journaling, I'll do this and that, I mean, I'll do anything but getting into what I'm supposed to write. So anybody that procrastinates, I would just say, like, you're not going to solve it necessarily. Just give yourself enough time. And so then
I totally relate to that, by the way. That was like, I'd sit down to write in the morning and diddle daddle for like an hour or two. And then finally, like, come on, dude.
You get mad at yourself, you're like, what are you doing? You set the whole day up, like people are really out there working for a living. And so finally after a couple hours, then it kicks in and I might, I'll start and I recommend this to anybody. And I've been recommending it to my students for 25 years is write the thing you most want to write that day. You don't have to write the next page. Like I never write sequentially. If I'm on page 14, I'm not going to write 15 the next day necessarily. Because I really want to just do the thing I want to do, I'll say, well, I haven't, like yesterday I was writing about this character who appears in the middle of this novel and I know who he is and I can picture him and I can hear him. And I just felt that day like I wanted to introduce him and write about that the first time the protagonist meets him. And, it has nothing to do with, it's page probably 130 or something in this book, but I just felt like doing it yesterday. And that gets me going. You get that scene, something written there, and then maybe you feel a little bit less self-loathing about how you're wasting the day. And then you might be able to say, well, while I'm here, then I'm kind of interested in touching up this other scene that I did a draft of a week ago. And then I'll go back and I'll see, how is this one working over here? Something that I did a month ago. I'll go back and revisit that and maybe polish that a little bit. And so I really do just sort of jump around.
Yeah. So you have a general idea of like what the storyline is, and then you're just jumping around. And
I know the whole story. I always do before I start. I don't think I don't know every word. I don't write down an outline.
There's still some space, it sounds like, for surprises.
So much space. And even within the scene, like this is like a little just how, the DVD behind the scenes featurette, but I wanted to write about this guy who he meets. Anyway, I'm not going to give too much detail, but I didn't know where they would even meet. And so yesterday I just had them sitting at a table, which has happened to me a few times in my life. Just somebody strikes up a conversation. I don't normally have that effect. I don't sit alone. And
someone struck it up with you.
Yeah. I don't put on a face that's like, talk to me, everybody, like I think that Tiffany and Vendler are much more, have friendlier faces, I think. And, but this has happened to me a few times. And I just thought, like, what would be an interesting way to say this? And I just have this guy say, we don't have to be friends. The guy across the table.
Yeah.
And it's so endearing and sort of kind of perplexing at the same time to be said that, to have somebody say that to you. And I thought, well, that's actually an interesting way to become friends with a stranger.
Yeah.
And so then I had that line. And then I thought, okay, what would my protagonist say to that? He'd say nothing because he's just thinking it through. And this other guy would say, and then he keeps going. And then it became clear I didn't have him being quite so gregarious, this new character, and so loquacious. But I was like, it's the best way to write a character is to let them talk a lot.
Yeah.
And I've learned this over and over, and then I forget it often. And then I'll read some great book that has a very talkative character, and then I'll remember like, oh, that's right. If you let somebody talk for half a page, you know this person.
Yeah.
Just let them talk.
They'll reveal themselves to you.
Yeah, and
the author.
It endears you to them, especially if they sort of have interests, you know. And so in Contrapposto, there's a character named Olympia who's like the one of the two main characters, and I just unleashed her from the very first moment. I was like, she's going to be a talker.
Yep.
She's going to be very brilliant. She has 1,000 interests and points of reference, and she retains a lot of knowledge, and she's worldly. And so if you just let her talk, you know her almost instantly.
Yeah.
I
immediately saw her in my head. Like,
she can do things that you don't love.
Yeah.
But you still love her because you're just like, boy, I wish I had a friend like that was so interesting and eloquent.
Yeah, well, and it's this, so Contrapposto it's just this beautiful story. I mean, it's so, on one level, it's so simple, and yet it's so beautiful. And it's just this amazing story about friendship and love and art and creativity. And I might be getting this wrong, but I might have heard it somewhere or read it somewhere, but was this one was brewing for a while for you? Or
yeah, I mean, probably since, I say 20 years, but it was longer than that because I went to art school for a half a minute. And so you take a few notes from those days, and you take a few notes from, and I studied art before that. And then I wrote about art in my 20s for like SF Weekly and some other places. Take some notes in the back of your head. And also you're doing that thing where if nobody has written the book about that topic that feels, that covers sort of what you know about something, like, has anyone written the novel about mountain biking, if nobody has done that, then you're the guy that has to do it.
Yeah.
And
was there a moment when you were like, okay, it's time to, this thing's ready to be birthed?
Yeah. I mean, it was all, it was a collection of notes over 20 years. And then finally, but waiting for the vessel. And sometimes you're just waiting for like, well, how do I tell this? Is this is this an epic poem? Is this do I tell it in reverse order? Is it all somebody looking back from age 75, or, and that format, or that the form of it actually is, for me, always the hardest thing. And if you don't have an interesting structure, or a structure that you're inspired by, then the book it's compromised. You can feel it being forced, and you can feel that there's that the structure isn't inspired. But when the structure is, when it clicks for the writer and the reader, then all of that stuff, that Ursula Le Guin theory of like the carrier bag theory of fiction, where all of this stuff can fit into this vessel. Once you have the right vessel, then the writing gets is not.
So what inspired you about this format, which is pretty much in the present across 60 years, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it just jumps forward. There's 7 sections that take place in different parts of their life. It starts when they're 9 and 10, and then it goes to like teenage years, and then college, and it jumps ahead, and it ends when they're in their 70s. That it's not such a complicated memento structure where.
So what about it though inspired you though?
Well, I think the main thing was to have these discrete sections where you don't even have any interstitial text explaining what happened between, age 20 and 30. And then we jump ahead to their 40s, and I don't say, and then this, and then that.
Which I loved, by the way. Like, I mentally noted that. I'm like, and this totally works. Like, it's just, he's jumping from here to there, and you don't need all that in between.
The reader can do all that work, and the reader is an active participant. And so it's the only art form where the recipient is an equal participant. So movie, you're not participating. I love film, but you're just 100% passive.
Yeah.
Music, maybe you're dancing, and that's a participatory element of it. But when you're reading a book, you're the cinematographer, you're the narrator. It's your voice. It's not theirs unless you're reading listening to an audiobook, but like otherwise it is your voice reading it. You are picturing everything. You're trying to conjure something for the reader, but it's at least 50% the reader's idea of what things look like. And they're using their own reference points. If you say prairie to somebody, it's not your prairie as an author,
Right.
It's the reader's prairie. You're saying that this person had an open, face and a magnetic personality. Well, then they're referencing all of the people that they know that fit that bill. So you're suggesting things to them, but the reader is like equal participant. And so I don't know where we got why we're on that.
Well,
topic.
you were going to get to the part where you wrote that sentence where he doesn't not write. Where you're writing that about Cricket, and Cricket says that in the sentence. No, he doesn't actually, but
he is. I mean, paperback. I can add that. I hope get it in there somewhere.
Footnote.
Yeah, but once that I knew the characters and I had so many scenes written, and then you're stuck. You can be stuck for a long time waiting for.
So when I asked this to a lot, some of the musicians I've had on, Tiffany, when you have those moments when, you have the general idea of the story, right? But surprises come through as you're writing. Do you have any personal thoughts or ideas about where that's coming from? Is it like a higher power? Is it just somewhere deep in your noggin?
I'm not a higher power in the creative. I don't see it that way. I do see it as like something ineffable, a little bit hard to figure out where, because a sentence will just appear and you're transcribing sometimes. You're not like, it's not muscle work. You're not like, what happens next? You're hearing it and you're like keeping up with it going on, especially with dialogue. Often that's just transcribing, which you're just bouncing in your head, bing, 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 bing. And so that long stretches of dialogue are the most fun and, easiest things to write, because you're hearing the two characters that you know so well, and you know exactly how they're going to talk to each other. And it's just sort of this, rapid fire. And especially with these two, as the longer they know each other, there's a little bit of they're familiar. They're smart asses to each other. They love each other, but there's maybe at some point too much knowledge of each other. I guess they want to shake free of it sometimes and say, I'm a little different than what you think, and I've evolved since we saw each other last. I'm not.
They're kind of like going in and out of each other's lives, but every time they come back, there's an obvious chemistry and some sort of spark there that neither of them can quite realize for their own reasons, I would say.
Yeah. I think that he's, from a very young age, he's madly in love with her because she sort of sees things in him that he doesn't see. She gives him his first public commission, which is, defacing a play structure when they're 8 and 9 years old or whatever.
Right.
But I think that she's so captivating, first intellectually.
Yeah.
And somebody that just is always like, sees him, as having, potential beyond what he sees. And he's from a single parent household in the middle of rural Indiana. He doesn't have, vast ambitions for himself. But she's much more worldly. She's been to Europe. She knows how things are. She could see him finding a larger place in the world. And so you follow that light, you follow that beacon for sure, like he does. And I think that, and then it's a matter of like, what is this going to look like? What does this love look like between them? And he's guesses wrong many times about what it's going to look like.
Yeah. I mean, at one point he's like about 29 or 30 and he's working in this apprenticeship in a soulless gallery, basically.
Yeah.
And she shows up unexpectedly, as she's wont to do. And there's obviously a chemistry there. And I'm just curious, like, if you were friends with Cricket at that time and you witness this, or he comes to you and he's like, man, I really like this girl, Olympia. Like, what should I do? Because he's kind of like, he's conflicted. He doesn't really know how to deal with the situation. Basically.
I've had so many people say that they feel so protective of Cricket and think that, you know, they'll use pop psychology terms about what she's doing to him. And I don't subscribe to any of these terms. I think they're all, you know, I think people are way more complex than whatever the lingo of the day will ascribe to them. So I think that, you know, I think they're always madly in love, just in a very hard way to define. And I think that once he realizes that it's not going to be a traditional, we're not getting married at 29. This is probably not going to happen. That it's going to be something much more amorphous, and that it won't be typical, sort of typical in any way. Like, because I think that when you know her early on, you're like, well, I don't see her necessarily committing everything via vows and them settling into some kind of you know, a traditional relationship, but I think he's quite okay with that once he realizes that, because I think that early on he gets advice from his grandfather about sort of dealing with the humans in your life and realizing that you know, all of the sort of peace and ownership over his self comes from his artwork, really, where he can sort of, anything on a canvas is just his, right? And he can create anything he wants to. He can, as a young kid, draw worlds and then just live and inhabit them. And that the people in his life, like Olympia, he'll take whatever she can give him and where she's available. And when comes into his life, he loves to have her there. But it's not about like, now that I have you close to me, I'm going to cage you in some way. Like, you know,
she is not one to cage.
Yeah. I mean, we're both we've both been married for a long time, so we live different lives. I'm interested for these two, you know, not that I have to say it, but this is, you know, these are fictional characters that are like, the reason to write
it's not
fiction,
you, Dave?
The reason to write fiction is to like explore something a little different and say like, what would it be like? Because I don't know very many people that have never been married.
Yeah.
And, but I can think of a few old hippies here in the Bay who are good friends of mine that just like have lived these fascinating lives in the arts. And for whatever reason, you know, they've been in relationships and I've met their boyfriends and girlfriends or whatever you want, partners over the years. But they never got married. And I think that they're have always been blissfully happy people. Yeah. Not that it's for everybody, but so they're in the back of my mind, like, oh, okay. You know, there are other ways. There's so many different ways to live a life. And these two, I think maybe when they're 30, that's when they both realize, or he certainly realizes that this is going to be, it's even in his 20s, I think he realizes this is going to be this. It's going to be whatever, be happy with that time you do have together. And it doesn't necessarily all have to be mapped out for either one of them.
Well, and just one other thing to comment on that's so wrapped through the book is and you sort of referenced it because you wrote about art previously, but you know, I just wanted to acknowledge like the way you write about art and the process, and you convey it really clearly and really well. And I don't think that's an easy thing to do, honestly. So that hit me as something I just wanted to touch on. But also, you know, another theme through the book is kind of Cricket's contentious relationship with the art world, I would say. And or just not sure how to function within it, maybe.
I think
which I know a lot of artists that are similar to that.
Yeah. I think we both, at our age, we know a lot of very talented people.
Yeah.
And you manage and, you know, put out records by musicians of every stripe. So you've met all kinds.
Yeah.
And so and one of the kinds of artists out there are somebody that has a lot of talent without a lot of ambition. And sometimes these people are the happiest artists,
Yeah.
because maybe they take 8 years between an album and they're super happy with that and they're not in any rush. The people that know what lines they can't cross compromise wise are I admire these people a lot. And when you know them and you're like, oh, that's so interesting. This person is so steady because they know they're not going to do this. They'll never do that, but they're going to do these other things. Right. Or, at this point, we're in our 50s. We've known hundreds of people in various arts. And so you start sort of studying and being observing at least the people that are very content. And at our age, you're looking for peace and contentment.
Yeah.
Like, how do you live happily each day? And one of the things is knowing what you enjoy doing in your field and what you don't, right? And Cricket early on, like he has this catastrophic art show that Olympia helps arrange. And he knew he wasn't going to want to do this and be there while people are drinking red wine and spilling it on his work and stuff like that. And then there are other sort of catastrophes that happen within the larger catastrophe. And it's like, well, he really knows from that moment on, he'll never do that again.
Yeah.
And whatever goals Olympia would have for him, that this would be a means to that end. Like, you'll be able to live as a successful painter if you just do blank, blank, blank. He doesn't want to do the blank, blank, blank to get to the successful. So he would forego the successful career as long as he never has to live those horrific hours again. And so I was just, having in mind a lot of people that have drawn sort of certain lines in the sand. And they're very rational ones too. And I think knowing what you don't want to do sometimes and staying within what makes it pleasurable is really key. And like, he loves the act of painting.
Yeah.
And everything after is a diminishment of that bliss.
Even seeing it the next day when it's like, oh, I hate that painting now.
To some extent, you could almost see him painting all night, burning that canvas. So he never has to wake to the disappointment that it's less than what he thought it was, which it usually is. So whenever you paint, you are so close to the canvas. Usually some people will paint, with 8-foot brushes to make sure they can. It's a great thing to do. But when I'm painting, I'm very close to the canvas. I think I'm doing something really good. I back up and it's not at all what I hoped it would be. So there's this total...
Why does it look like Snoopy? I don't know.
I was going for, Popeye and now it looks like Snoopy. So this happens a lot. And so he's very aware that everything after the act of creation is a diminishment. And there are other people like, most people that make a living at it are over that. They can handle it.
Yeah.
I know my first drafts are terrible and I'm going to work toward it. So I've had to mature beyond maybe where Cricket. So he is kind of stunted in a way. He is in a way, like he won't make any of these compromises, but he still loves to paint. And so he ends up, later in the book, he's actually making not forgeries, but copies of paintings because in a way that's a pure and making money enough to live on an island off Thailand. He's making enough money to live on the beach, swim every day, have a drink and with dinner and, dating some woman who's married to somebody else in Australia. Anyway, it's a very kind of contented life. But he's making copies of well-known paintings, but it's pure painting because there's nothing at stake.
Yeah.
He just gets to move color around on
still
canvas.
Still an act of creation. And
and it's almost like if you're in a Jimmy Buffett cover band on an island in the Florida Keys, wouldn't that be a fantastic life?
Right.
It would.
Yeah.
And at our age, we know this. At 30, you might be like, no, that would not be enough for me. But I think as you get older and you're like, boy, what you really want is like, wake up to beauty, have a day, all the days be a little different, be around people you love, feel rewarded creatively enough, give joy to people, have them respond to you, have a good meal, sleep at night.
These are boundaries, as you're saying.
Yeah.
Like that.
But how do you get
stay
there?
Within there? And
and if you would prefer playing Jimmy Buffett covers than struggling with your own compositions and having people be like, that's not really good enough, Ted. That's not, we're not going to record that. And then struggling with like rejection and all that. Instead, Cricket has said like, well, I have everything I want here on this island. I'd love to swim. I love to, whatever. And I think that, so it's one way to think about. And I think that in each chapter, it's taking a little bit of a different look at different ways to go about a life in the arts. We see negative examples, and we see people that have maybe figured it out and figured out an equilibrium.
Well, and we're closing down on time here quickly, but
so quick.
I did want to, last point is, as I was reading that chapter about when Cricket's making duplicate paintings or copy, whatever you want to call them, of master paintings, in my head, I'm like, oh, this is kind of like human AI before AI.
Nope.
He's not.
No.
Dave was like, no effing way.
It's so funny. So this is another thing I was writing yesterday.
Yeah.
So I was in the same I was writing about this guy meeting, protagonists. And then one of the other passages I was writing was that one of my characters is always quick to correct her kids when they make comparisons to machines and computers. Like the body, she's a nurse. She says, the body is not a machine.
Right.
Your brain is not a computer. Nothing is AI. And she goes through this whole thing, which is like a passage I thought was pretty funny. But I don't think anything is like AI, especially these arts that have been around 500 years. We can't compare them to some, new thing. And I always resist putting a beautiful ancient art into, it's like this specious new thing.
Even if it's a human making the duplicate, then of something that already exists.
Well, it bears no resemblance because AI is taking all of this creativity and genius from centuries, mashing it together, spitting it out into this like ungodly, disgusting form.
Soulless form
In its own, like, that the stuff that comes, the visual art that comes, it's not art, but the visual garbage that comes out of AI, the two-dimensional visual stuff is beyond uncanny valley. It always makes you like, it cinches up the stomach in the same way you see like a burn victim. Like you react so quickly to how wrong it is. And I think that actually is like the soul reacting against something that is so like unholy, And what he's doing by contrast, and this is really important to know, is that when classical painting training for centuries would require making copies. So you would sit, if you were in Paris in 1880, you'd sit in the Louvre and you'd get permission to paint copies of, old masters. And this was part of how we learned.
It's part of his training, part of
everybody's training.
Yeah.
And some of that was lost in the latter part of the 20th century, but it's a great way to learn. And if you can do a Lucian Freud 1 minute and then do a Botero the next minute and Edward Hopper and get the brushstrokes right, everything, you become, that is a master artist.
Right.
And then it's a matter of, do you have any imagination and something new to offer?
Bringing your own persona into all that you have learned. Yeah.
But, it was very common, and you still see it sometimes, for people to have copies hung in their homes as clearly copies, but as as they were either done by students or done in tribute or homage to those artists. But to get it all right, Cricket, think about the variety of his days too. It's like he's playing classical guitar 1 minute and Jimmy Buffett the next, and then the Police the next, and Radiohead or whatever. Like, he gets to do all of these different things, and every day is different.
Yeah.
And he's in a kind of, not that Phuket, Thailand is a paradise, because I've been there. It's not, but there are parts of it that are nicer than others. And he's living for dollars, a few dollars a day. So I wanted to offer that. And, every section offers a different way to kind of look at it. And, but so much of it really is about having the self-knowledge to know how are you truly happy. And he's unusual, at least in that chapter. Later on, I think he finally finds the exact place where he's supposed to be, and I won't spoil that. But in general, whether it's just knowing how you split up a day, or knowing what kind of art makes you happiest to make, and or how you share it with people. Is it through podcasts? Is it through a small gallery that you like to show your work? In Paris, there are people that have their studios in the back, and then they'll have a small gallery in the front, which I think is just a phenomenal way to live. People will walk in, the bell rings, they'll come out, and they'll sell you a print or something. And but whatever it is, you do have to think about it and think like, well, okay, I see the dominant structure in the visual art world. I don't love how
dominant
a lot of this works.
Structure, and
there's so many aspects to like the very highest echelons that are very troubling sometimes. And the speculation and that happens in visual art, and the huge irrational numbers that are involved in it. But there are so many other ways to go through it. And I love so much of there's some, a few critical passages about the visual art world, but I hope there's enough that's celebratory, because I do think that there's still like 1,000 paths. If you like to draw and you like to make images, there's 1,000 paths that you can pursue to make a happy life for yourself. And none of them should involve any compromises that you don't feel comfortable with.
Well, it is honestly just a beautiful book. Congratulations on this mastery. And, you can feel your love of writing and the characters in the book as well, I think, which is a beautiful testament. So last question before we go, what are you loving right now?
Well, we forgot to talk about was the Valentino Ashagdeng Foundation.
Yes.
And we just heard from Val yesterday. And so one thing I love is that we've met through this.
Yes.
Valentino, who I wrote about in What is the What, started a series of schools in South Sudan. He's got a very thriving one in the town of Awil in the Bahr el Ghazal region near his home. And he's been, we're going on maybe 10,000 students that have been educated at one of the premier high schools in South Sudan, a country that is, still experiencing the spasms of, post-conflict, still the newest country.
All of that.
One of the newest countries in the world. But that said, Awil is growing, Juba is growing, these towns are growing. There is peace in a lot of parts of the country. And meanwhile, there are young people getting educated because of Valentino. And
that all started because of a book. Another one of Dave's books. What is the What? Is it
Valentino being this visionary and in the sphere of education, he is so fierce fighting to make sure that these schools have stayed open even during conflict, and fighting to get young women into these schools where illiteracy for young women during the war was 99%. Now, most of his pupils are young women. So that's so much of what he did to convince the culture that it was time to change. Young women deserved to go to school. They deserved, a life free of child marriage, which was so culturally woven into South Sudan for so long.
And just quickly before we end, just to add that, the thing about Valentino, especially if you've read your book, What is the What, and all that he went through, and like seeing people get eaten by lions in the book, and family getting killed and all of that, and he's still such a light, you know? He's such a presence, and he could have like easily gone just to a very dark place and stayed there, and yet he did not. And you know, in a way, just as a little aside, like obviously you lost your parents when you were young, 20-ish, 21, and I feel like there's something similar about you in that I see a light in you that you could have just like turned off to life as soon as that happened, and yet you're still putting positivity and you know, joy out into the world and changing a lot of people's lives for the better. So I just wanted to recognize that, Dave, and thank you again for
look up ValentinoAchak.com and .org and the foundation, and whenever you try to explain the URL, you get it wrong. But if you look at Valentino Achak Gang, you'll find his website and all the work he's been doing.
I'll put the links in the show notes.
And you know, now that we're honestly 20 years from when that book came out.
That's crazy.
So as you know, as a board member, it's not always easy to raise money after 20 years. So we do urge people. The work continues even 20 years on, and it's more urgent now than ever. So if you're up for it, check out what he's been up to, and support the foundation and the school if you can.
Yep, there's a lot of need in the world, but I can promise you that with this particular foundation, it is all going.
Your dollar goes a long way.
Goes a long way.
Because Valentino is frugal, and he knows the value of your donation, and also it's going directly to tuition, directly to the classroom. There is no U.S. office of like 30 people, and you're paying rent in Park Avenue. No. This is all the work being done on the ground, and it's being done with great diligence and care and attention to doing it frugally. So,
yes. With that said, thanks again, Dave. This was awesome. Didn't even get to like a third of my questions, but we'll just have to do it again.
I appreciate all the work.
Yeah. It was a super fun conversation.
You want me to go through it?
And make notes.
Thanks, bud.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave.
Right.
And just a reminder to all of my regular listeners out there, I am taking the next couple weeks off to build up a surplus of more episodes. But you should expect to hear from me again sometime, I would say, in September. So looking forward to that. In the meantime, if you have been enjoying the podcast, certainly head on over to Apple Podcasts, go to my main page, scroll down, give me some stars, even leave a review of what you like about the podcast. That would be a huge help, and I would really appreciate it. So until September, I hope the summer is treating you right, and keep trying to find more love in the world.
There's some Ghost in the Machine.
Ghost in the Machine. There we go. Great Police album.
You know, the underrated song from that album is Omega Man.
Why is that?
You don't know the song.
I mean, I know the song.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, good. You're the first person I've ever mentioned.
I was a big
to.
Police fan too.
Yeah.
So
but it never gets played. You never hear it referenced.
Down with their catalog. So.
Yeah. And Spirits in the Material World. Never liked that song.
You didn't like it?
Oh, God. There's no melody. There's just, you know.
Well,
didn't understand